The Queen is gone, but her final act has ignited a war that no one saw coming. When King Charles opened the sealed royal will, he expected honor, tradition, and trust. Instead, he found betrayal buried under velvet and diamonds. A single bequest to Catherine has left Charles reeling, and the monarchy on the edge of collapse. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace shifted the moment the Queen's personal will was unsealed. Royal protocol dictated utmost confidentiality, with only the closest circle of advisors and King Charles present in the private chamber. But the calm silence shattered the instant Charles turned to the page marked crown jewels and personal adornments. Written in the Queen's unmistakable cursive was a declaration that froze him in place. The diamond tiara of Queen Mary shall be passed directly and exclusively to the Duchess of Cambridge, Catherine. For Charles, it was as though his mother had reached from beyond the grave to make a statement he never anticipated, a decision layered with intent, power, and personal sentiment. This wasn't just any jewel. The diamond tiara in question had long stood as a symbol of continuity worn by Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and once considered a ceremonial heirloom for the reigning Queen Consort. For decades, it had been whispered that the piece would eventually be placed on Camilla's head, not only as a show of legitimacy, but as a final approval from the late monarch. As if every corner of the palace itself was holding its breath. The Queen's final message hadn't been spoken. It had been etched in diamonds and wrapped in silence. But it wasn't just the gift that sent ripples across the monarchy. It was what the Queen didn't include that raised even more questions. No mention of Camilla, no explanation for the change in expected succession of jewelry, no note of clarification, justification, or context. It was as if the Queen had deliberately allowed the silence to speak louder than any royal decree, and within that silence, courtiers began whispering about a hidden meaning, an unspoken judgment, a veiled message left for those clever enough or bold enough to interpret it. Was this the Queen's final act of defiance against a past she never fully accepted? Or was it her last attempt to protect a legacy she feared was slipping away? Whatever the answer, one thing had become clear. The gift of the tiara was not a gesture of ornament, it was a transfer of trust, of favour, and perhaps of power itself. Catherine hadn't just inherited a piece of jewellery, she had inherited the full weight of the Queen's final confidence, and the dangerous attention that came with it. But it wasn't just the tiara. It was what the Queen didn't say that cracked the royal foundation wide open. Was this the Queen's final power move, or her most silent rebellion? As aides decode her private annotations, a chilling truth emerges. Elizabeth may have quietly rewritten the monarchy's future in her final days. The diamond tiara was just the surface. The legacy it symbolizes cuts much deeper, buried within the secured vaults of Windsor, a secondary set of documents known only, not through force, but through faith from a queen now gone. In the days following the will's release, Catherine's instinct was to reject the diamond tiara, not out of fear or modesty, but out of deference to the royal order she had long respected. She privately approached palace legal counsel, requesting a transfer of the inheritance back to the Crown's central vault, but what she heard in return shifted the air around her entirely. The clause left by Queen Elizabeth had been worded with absolute finality. The tiara was not just a gift, it had been marked as non-transferable by royal decree. In effect, the Queen had not given Catherine a choice. The Crown had spoken, and Catherine had been anointed in silence. But Catherine was not as alone in this as she thought. Weeks-old hidden footage from internal palace surveillance, never meant to be seen beyond security review, revealed a crucial detail. Princess Anne had visited the Queen repeatedly in her final months, and one particular visit stood out. During that time, Anne was recorded exiting the Queen's private drawing room, holding a sealed envelope, the very one later handed to Catherine after the will was read. This revelation sent a clear, piercing signal through royal watchers, Anne knew, and she had honoured the Queen's secrecy without question. The implications were staggering. Not only had Anne supported the decision, she had safeguarded it from the very monarch her brother had become. A quiet storm continued to build behind closed doors. A leaked recording, audio only, but unmistakable, captured a conversation between William and Catherine in their private residence. William's voice, heavy with tension, simply said, "S." He knew what she was doing. Catherine's reply came after a pause, soft but resolute. "Then we have to be what she saw in us." It was a private moment never meant for public consumption, but now replayed in the minds of every advisor and loyalist inside the royal circle. The Queen hadn't made a symbolic choice, she had made a strategic one. By the following week, Catherine's senior staff were given new marching orders. Without fanfare or formal announcement, preparations began for an expanded ceremonial role for the Princess of Wales. While public appearances remained unchanged, a new calendar was drafted, private briefings with defence advisors were scheduled, and Catherine's presence at state briefings increased. The change wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. A shift had begun, not by vote or crown, but by the unseen architecture of royal confidence. The Queen's former lady-in-waiting, a figure rarely quoted in public, broke years of silence to give a single statement to the press. Catherine was born for duty, not privilege. That is why Her Majesty chose her. The quote spread like wildfire, not just across headlines but deep within the royal institution itself. Advisors, already shaken by the Queen's will, now found themselves forced into factions, those who believed this was the natural evolution of the monarchy's future, and those who saw it as a dangerous reordering, bordering on quiet rebellion. Some viewed Catherine's ascension as the Queen's final act of loyalty to the late Princess Diana. Others saw it as a calculated bypass of the current king's wishes, but whatever side they chose, none could deny the momentum had changed. The centre of gravity had shifted. 8. A symbolic gesture of trust, of continuity. The Queen refused. Her decision at the time seemed rooted in tradition, but now, in light of the tiara's final destination, it feels like something else entirely. A message long withheld, only now unveiled. The woman who gave Charles everything, his title, his destiny, even his second chance at happiness, had delivered one last, silent verdict. And it didn't include him. In theory, the monarchy is built to withstand emotion. It demands stoicism, structure, and discipline. But beneath the ancient rituals and gilded crowns are still human hearts. Charles, for all his years of training, could not remain untouched by the emotional storm that followed. His grief for his mother, his fear of a shifting legacy, and his quiet suspicion that he was losing the court's loyalty began to weigh heavily. And the cracks began to show. Within days, several palace staff members closely tied to Camilla were quietly dismissed or reassigned. No official reason given, but the timing said it all. A reshuffling, deliberate, strategic, and deeply personal. Behind the scenes, Charles made a dramatic move. He ordered a comprehensive review of all ceremonial documents left unfinalized by Queen Elizabeth in her final year. This wasn't mere housekeeping, it was a hunt, a search for any remaining surprises, any unexecuted decisions that might further undermine his control. The review team was sworn to secrecy, yet rumors slipped through. Some claim Charles became obsessed with a particular red file marked Windsor Private Legacy. What it contained was unclear, but its disappearance from the Queen's vault had been noted. And now the hunt for it had become his fixation. This wasn't about jewels anymore. It was about memory, authority, legacy, and the suffocating realization that his mother may have drawn the future in ink while he waited for it in pencil. The tiara was not the weapon, it was the trigger. And now, as Charles watched the loyalty of his house shift toward the woman once dismissed as merely a duchess, he faced a new fear, that he was no longer shaping the monarchy but being edged out of it. But the past is not easily buried, and one document, locked away in Windsor's vault, threatens to rip the monarchy even further apart. Buried for years under marble and protocol, a sealed envelope marked to be opened only upon my death sends shockwaves through the highest ranks. What the Queen left behind wasn't just treasure, it was a declaration. And within its pages lies the motive behind the diamond tiara decision. The envelope had rested untouched deep within Windsor's royal vaults, archived under lock, glass, and silence. It was only during Charles's urgent order to review the Queen's unfinalized ceremonial records that it was discovered. The vault's unlocking was attended by Princess Anne and the Lord Chamberlain themselves, a rare pairing that signalled the sensitivity of what lay within. Once opened, it revealed a single handwritten letter, undated, unaddressed, but unmistakably the Queen's. It wasn't protocol, it was personal. And its contents left even the most seasoned historians stunned. The Queen's pen moved not with the coldness of law, but with the warmth and warning of a woman who had seen the cost of power. The letter opened with reflections on legacy and monarchy, but quickly veered into a territory no royer. LS, like fire through dry grass. Legal experts began to warn the palace of the stakes involved. Challenging the Queen's will wasn't just an internal dispute, it risked tearing at the monarchy's fragile veil of sacred continuity. Public trust, already shaken by years of scandal and internal division, could shatter completely if the matter went to court. For Charles, who remained painfully torn between his wife and his late mother's legacy, the moment was impossible. A decision had to be made: protect the institution or defend his queen consort. But time was running out. But before Camilla can press further, a shocking alliance emerges, one that could change the monarchy's power structure forever. Two women, one legacy. Princess Anne and Catherine have always shared mutual respect, but never a cause, until now. With the monarchy facing internal collapse, the most unexpected alliance forms, backed by an ancient clause and royal precedent hidden in plain sight. It happened in the smallest of places, a private chapel nestled within the grounds of Windsor. No cameras, no courtiers, no agenda. Just Anne and Catherine, seated in silence until words finally came. It wasn't a meeting called out of formality, it was born from necessity. The weight of the Queen's final wishes had fractured the palace. Camilla's legal manoeuvring had cast a shadow that now threatened to consume not just Catherine's future, but the very fabric of royal continuity. The leaked audio, captured by an unknown insider, revealed a moment so raw and unfiltered it stunned even seasoned royal watchers. Anne's voice, unwavering, said simply, "She chose you, and now you must choose to protect what she gave." It was a rare and deliberate move. Edward, known for walking a careful line between duty and diplomacy, placed his name and his future behind Catherine's symbolic stewardship. Sophie followed without hesitation. The palace, once divided, began recalibrating around a new axis, and at the centre of it all stood William, frustrated, protective, and quietly seething. He reportedly told a close aide, "This is bigger than titles. This is blood." His words signalled a truth the monarchy hadn't faced in decades. This was no longer about protocol, it was about survival. Camilla, once protected by the quiet strength of Charles's love, now stood increasingly alone. None of the senior royals backed her public objections. Her push to challenge the Queen's will had triggered not a legal victory, but a moral reckoning. And no alliance was more damning than the one between Anne and Catherine. But just as stability begins to return, the final twist emerges from the one person who was never supposed to speak, sealed since 1996, hidden away under legal lock and key. Diana's private letter, addressed to my sons, should something happen to me, was never meant for the public, but its contents explain why Queen Elizabeth made her choice, and why Catherine was always meant to wear the tiara. The discovery was pure accident or divine timing, depending on who you ask. During a routine audit of secure archives connected to the late Queen's personal estate, ordered by Anne and Catherine's alliance to clarify unresolved asset placements, a mahogany safe was identified. Unmarked and misfiled under an obscure ledger from 1997, the safe had been overlooked for decades. Its contents? A series of envelopes, two of which were addressed to William and Harry in Diana's unmistakable script. The one marked for William was the first to be opened. The second, marked to both, remained untouched at the time. What William read changed everything. Inside the letter, Diana wrote with urgency, pain, and a clarity that felt prophetic. "Protect her if I cannot be there," she wrote. "She will complete the story I was forced to leave unfinished." Those lines, penned in a time of fear and uncertainty, seemed to speak directly of Catherine. Diana described a presence she had once sensed, but would never meet a woman who would embody the grace, strength, and integrity that Diana believed the monarchy needed to survive. She called her a light and warned, with devastating foresight, that light must be kept safe from those who thrive in shadow. Every sentence echoed with pain, but also with resolve. The Queen, it now seemed, had not only read this letter long ago, but had acted on it. William, upon reading the letter, reportedly wept for hours, not just for his mother, but for the clarity she had finally given him. According to a palace aide, his words afterward were simple but revealing. He finally understood everything. He understood why the Queen had chosen Catherine, why Anne had stood beside her, why Camilla's resistance felt hollow, and perhaps most painfully, why his father had remained distant throughout the storm. That same day, Charles was handed a copy of the letter in private. Observers say he didn't speak for several minutes. When he finally did, the only words he offered were, "She knew." The letter, though never publicly released in full, was summarized in a carefully controlled internal document that was leaked perhaps intentionally to the press. Public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Hashtags like #Crown Restored and #Diana's Will resurfaced, and Catherine's public support soared to unprecedented levels. The tiara was no longer just a jewel, it had become the thread tying together a story of loss, resilience, and redemption. Diana's voice, silenced for so long, had returned not to reopen wounds, but to heal them in the only way she knew how, through love for her sons, and trust in the woman she never met but somehow foresaw. This revelation didn't just vindicate Catherine, it fortified her. It aligned her with history's pain and promise, and it cast the Queen's decision not as a rebellion, but as a quiet fulfillment of a mother's last request. The crown had always been hers, not by bloodline, but by design. Not to rule, but to protect. Not to dominate, but to restore. And as the dust settles, the crown remains, but it is no longer what it once was. One final move changes royal history. There was no throne, no scepter, no televised grandeur. But it was a coronation all the same. In a quiet ceremony attended only by the most trusted, Catherine stepped into the true power the Queen bestowed upon her, not to rule, but to restore. The chapel was silent when Anne placed the tiara into Catherine's hands. There was no priest, no choir, no audience beyond the few who had witnessed every battle that led to this moment. Yet it carried more weight than a state coronation ever could. Anne, the woman who had stood guard over the Queen's last wishes, now fulfilled them not with pomp, but with purpose. Catherine, holding the tiara with steady hand. With how things had unfolded. Whether or not that was true remains unknown, but she has not spoken publicly since. The people, however, spoke loudly. As stories of the tiara, the letter, and the Queen's hidden intentions trickled into the public domain, something unprecedented occurred. Catherine was no longer just the Princess of Wales. She became, in the hearts of millions, the spiritual successor to Queen Elizabeth II. Not in title, but in temperament. Not by law, but by loyalty. She had inherited something no coronation could give: trust. And in a time when monarchies across the world struggle for relevance, that trust meant everything. A new chapter began, not etched into stone tablets or announced from balconies, but passed down in moments of silence, of sorrow, and of strength. This chapter was not written in ink, but in sacrifice, not carried by titles, but by legacy, not built on power, but on pain and the grace to rise above it. The Queen may be gone, but her vision lives on in a woman who never asked to lead, but who was chosen to preserve. And so, from beneath velvet and diamonds emerged not just a queen, but a legacy reborn. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.